Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sally Zaleski. I'm the Executive Office Manager with South Carolina Citizens for Life, and I'd like to welcome you to another installment of our Proudly Pro-Life webcast. Today, this webcast is pre-recorded, so we won't be taking any live questions during this interview. Today, we are joined by Jeannie Stoner. She was the Executive Director of Abortion Recovery Assistance at Piedmont Women's Center, retired, and she is currently an advisor to abortion recovery at Piedmont Women's Center in Spartanburg. No, Greenville, in the upstate. So with that, we have Holly Gatling, who is our Executive Director. She's going to bring us the news as of Thursday, July 9th. And with that, I'm going to kick this over to Holly, and she's going to start with the interview and news. Holly?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the South Carolina Citizens for Life Proudly Pro-Life webcast. When there's news to report, I give a little news report. And there was big news from the United States Supreme Court yesterday, and I would like to give you two different perspectives. Okay, this is how NPR, National Public Radio, reported the decision, the United States Supreme Court decision in the Little Sisters of the Poor. The United States Supreme Court has made it more difficult for women to get access to birth control. That was their headline in their first paragraph. Now, let me read you how, from the perspective of the National Right to Life Committee, National Right to Life praises U.S. Supreme Court decision of conscience in Little Sisters of the Poor versus Pennsylvania. First sentence. The U.S. Supreme Court this morning ruled in favor of the Little Sisters of the Poor in a decision that protected the elderly nun's right of conscience. The vote was 7-2, with Justice Clarence Thomas writing the opinion for the court. So you see the starkly different manner of reporting from the secular pro-abortion press, you know, that this is an attack on women's access to birth control, which it is not. It is a freedom of conscience decision, and it was 7-2. Interestingly, Justice Stevens and Justice Elena Kagan, sided with the majority. They wrote a separate opinion, but still the same, a 7-2 decision in favor of the freedom of conscience in religious matters is a very, very good decision from our United States Supreme Court. Also, I want you to know that on Monday at 8 o'clock, our friend Mark Baumgardner, who's the Executive Director of A Moment of Hope, which is the sidewalk counseling ministry outside of Planned Parenthood in Columbia, still has his court date, 8 o'clock, for the ticket that he received for violating the City of Columbia's stay-at-home ordinance. Okay. Please keep Mark in your prayers. I plan to be there to cover it. As most of you know, I was a reporter for 20 years. So I'm going back into my reporter mode on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. And so watch the South Carolina Citizens for Life Facebook, social media, and our email tree for a report on the results of what happens to Mark Baumgardner's ticket for violating the City of Columbia's stay-at-home ordinance, when he actually had a letter from the city attorney saying that religious activities were exempt from the stay-at-home order. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. So now, to our guest, Jeannie Stoner. Jeannie, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this wonderful post-abortion healing ministry.
Well, in 1991, Piedmont Women's Center opened, and I attended that first training that they had. I thought that I would be, I didn't really know exactly what I would be doing. I just knew I was pro-life, and I needed to be able to account for what my beliefs were. And so I went to the training, and what happened was the training was hard. And when they sent a paper around asking what I would like to do, I saw that there was a post-abortion Bible study, and I thought, well, I can teach Bible study. And so that was the beginning of that. Judy Cooter and I began that ministry, and in 1992, the ministry kicked off, and it was amazing what the Lord did with that ministry, just through our faithfulness to do it. But we had no idea what we were doing. We just followed what the Lord called us to do.
Okay, I have to unmute. I have to remember to unmute myself. So, tell us. So, tell us about the progress of this amazing ministry and where it is now, all these many years later.
Well, one of the things that Judy and I did from the very beginning was we felt that it was important that the ministry be of excellence. And we began to train others to do this ministry. And our ministry, we did it 2 by 2, as the scriptures Jesus called the disciples to go out 2 by 2. And so what we did was we two went forward and did a class, and then those two took one person apiece, and we began to multiply the ministry that way. And we went to connected with CareNet, and actually back then it was called the Abortion Recovery Ministry was called PACE, and we began using PACE materials and doing Forgiven and Set Free, which is Linda Cochran's Bible study, which she developed out of her own need for post-abortion healing. And so we began training and teaching and facilitating classes, and it was amazing to see what the Lord did. He eventually invited us to go to Russia and to the Ukraine to actually train women over there to do the ministry. Carolyn Rice joined us, and at that point, we were asked to write a manual to take to Russia. And so they said it had to be simple, that they did not want it to have psychology in it, because the Russian women would not understand that. And so we began to look at what we were actually using as training materials, and we began to look at our language, how we because we had, in the South, we have lots of slang and euphemisms, and so we had to take a lot of that out so it could be understood. And so it ended up that we took a small manual to Russia that was probably not a half-inch thick, if that. And from that, we did our first training over there. We came back and went to a Focus on the Family conference and took that little manual with us, and other people were interested in it. And therefore, the U.S. version was developed. And the manual, the Leader's Guide, specifically, but it could be used with other ministries, but specifically was developed to go with Forgiven and Set Free. And so then it began to be used across the country, and then we were invited to go to the Ukraine and do the same type of training over there. And at that point, the manual or the the manual was done in a better translation. And so from there, it began to just grow, and people ordered it all across the country so that they would have a training of excellence that could be used and reproduced in other ministries, especially those that would never have the opportunity to go to a PACE training or somewhere. You know, there are lots of small abortion recovery ministries, those connected with pregnancy care centers and those that aren't, that really could not afford to go and get a training at a conference. So that began to fill a need there. And as that grew, then we were called, or I was called, Lena Smith asked me to do a podcast, which went along with the Facilitating Biblical Healing Leader's Guide with Forgiven and Set Free. And so that I did that. It was like 13-hour podcast, and that is available through Piedmont Women's Center as well. We also had the opportunity to do a film, which is called Set Free, which is about a 35-minute film, which is used as well across the country, and in some instances internationally as well.
I think that it's fascinating that you were invited to Russia and the Ukraine. Tell us about how that invitation came about, and how serious is the problem of post-abortion syndrome, shall we say, you know, the post-abortion problem for these women and families in Russia and the Ukraine?
Well, when we were over there, on average, women who experienced an abortion had, on average, 8 abortions apiece. I know that is shocking, and a lot of people do not know that. Now, that was average. Some of the women that we met over there had as many as 30 or more. And so you think, how can that happen? But during communism, abortion was the only sanctioned form of birth control. And therefore, they used that as birth control. And so when we went over there, a lot of the women, it just became a part of what they did. You know, they got pregnant, they had an abortion. And, but with an abortion, there are wounds. There are wounds that happen, emotional wounds, and spiritual wounds as well, and physical wounds can happen as well. So when we went over there, a lot of the women said, you know, do we really need this? And so we asked the question. In fact, Carolyn Rice asked it, and she asked the lady, she said, have you ever had surgery? And she said, yes. And she said, how many people did you tell about your surgery? Because, you know, when we have surgeries, we tell everybody about our surgeries, right? And the woman began to tell about it. And then Carolyn asked the question, how many people did you tell about your abortion surgery? And the woman just went blank. And she said, we knew it was wrong, but we just did it. And so that began other women in Russia, because we didn't want to go and be the ministers in Russia. We wanted to train Russian and Ukrainian women to do this ministry. And that's always the best way. And so what we did was we left them with the tools, the leader's guide in Russian, and that way they were able to actually train and minister themselves. Now, Carolyn is still over there, but she is in the Republic of Georgia, and she trains women to do this ministry over there. So, you know, Judy has gone to be with Jesus, and Carolyn is in Georgia, and I was here in the U.S., so I continued to carry on the ministry here in the U.S., and I'm still supporting Piedmont Women's Center in an advisory capacity.
That is absolutely fascinating. So take us through, typically a woman comes in, she's post-aborted, and she's willing to go through this forgiven and set free healing ministry. Tell us what the program looks like for her. And I know you said that there's the podcast, which is available, but there's also in person, correct?
Oh, the podcast is training for facilitators, for leaders.
Got it.
It is not as the healing part of the ministry.
Right. Take us through that, what that looks like for the woman or the family members who participate.
Okay. We have this ministry for both men and women. The women's is forgiven and set free. The men's is healing the father's heart, because men are affected by the loss of a child through abortion as well. And so a woman comes into Piedmont Women's Center, or she could go online. You can actually go online to the Piedmont Women's Center website, and there is a self, let's say, well, how do they call it? I can't remember exactly what the words are. Anyway, she can actually answer about 8 or 10 questions. And at the end of that, they're very simple, it's very short. She can click a thing that she could be contacted by someone at Piedmont Women's Center to get more information about the Forgiven and Set Free Bible study and when it will be offered. So if a woman comes into Piedmont Women's Center, or if, you know, maybe she's across the street, because Piedmont Women's Center, as most people know, is across from the abortion clinic here in Greenville. And if there are sidewalk counselors out there and they tell this woman who's experienced an abortion already about Piedmont Women's Center and about the ministry over there, she can go over there, and there is a that she will be talked to about the Bible study. So she comes in, there will be an individual meeting with her just to become acquainted with her. And then at the end of that, then she will be put into a group. Usually the groups run at least twice a year. And when Judy and I were doing it, sometimes we would run multiple groups at one time. Maybe we would have 3 or 4 groups of anywhere from 4 to 8 women in each group. So anyway, she gets her interview. We don't call it an interview, we call it an intake. And so she will do her intake, and then she will meet for the first class with her group, which could be anywhere from 2 women in a group with 2 facilitators. Like I said earlier, we use Christ's model of sending out his disciples 2 by 2 to preach the gospel, to heal the sick, and to cast out evil spirits. And so actually that is exactly what this ministry does. And so through the gospel, through the word of God, they use this Bible study that Linda wrote, and it takes them through different stages of the ministry. And let me just run this past you here. The first thing they do when they come into it, they do their intake, then they have a class that's called How Do I Know Where I Need Healing? And then followed up with the character of God, which most of us at some point in our lives have had doctrine in our lives that we've learned even as children that aren't necessarily true. And so the character of God lesson helps to straighten out any misconceptions or errors, because we have a lot of women who come in who are Christians, non-Christians, believers in other faiths, other religions. And so what we do is we establish that we're using the Bible. That is our healing tool. And so they know that when they come in to begin with. And then after that, it's relief and denial. Then they deal with anger. And then the need to forgive. Sorry, something keeps popping up on my screen. Depression, forgiven and set free, and then acceptance. And we have one lesson that is in there that we actually deal with the babies that they have lost, and it's called letting go. And one of the main things that people don't really consider when they think of a woman or a man who's experienced an abortion, they may think of the grief, not the grief, the anger, denial. They may think of shame, a lot of other things like that, regret. But one of the main things that a woman or a man who has lost a child through abortion deals with is great grief. And so we focus a lot on that grief and the loss of that child. And so after a woman goes through all these different stages, she is ready at that point to reconnect with her child to a certain degree and begin to properly grieve the loss of that child. There's a healthy way of grieving and an unhealthy way of grieving. And what Forgiven and Set Free does is it brings them to a place where they can grieve that child in a proper way.
Judy, that is absolutely fascinating, and Sally will let people know how they can watch this video. It will be posted on our website for as long as that website exists. And anyone, a woman who has had an abortion, a father of an aborted baby, any family members that are seeking healing for the loss of this child, we want them to have access to this program through Piedmont Women's Center. We can't thank you enough for what you've done for post-aborted moms, families, and we wish you many graces and blessings on your continued ministry to this devastated, very hurting population. I mean, there have been more than 60 million abortions in this country. Now, one of the statistics is that 40% of women in this population have had 2 or more abortions. So that's still a huge population of deeply wounded people. And so, even when Roe versus Wade is overturned, and we do believe it will be, but even when it is, so this ministry will still be needed probably for decades to come. So, Sally, let me kick it back to you, and we'll close out the program.
Thank you, Holly. Jeannie, thank you again. This was just an amazingly fascinating interview, just wonderful content, and I learned something new today as well. So for those that have been out there in the trenches for a while, we're always open to learning new things and finding out that something that we thought we knew, there's always another layer of depth to that. So thank you very much. As Holly mentioned, and as Jeannie mentioned during the interview, if you are a woman or man who is watching this interview and has been, and whose lives have been touched by abortion, and you would like to learn how to work through that process of abortion, and you're looking for forgiveness and being set free from that, the Healing the Father's Heart program, the Forgiven and Set Free program, you can contact Piedmont Women's Center in Greenville with their abortion recovery program there. If you're not familiar with where Greenville is, or if you're not near the local area, you can reach out to your local pregnancy care center and they can get you connected with the abortion recovery program. If you are someone who is saying, I would like to get involved in learning how to bring this program to women and men, please again contact Piedmont Women's Center. You can talk to Jeannie Stoner, I'm sure, up at Piedmont Women's Center. I'll put their information in the Facebook post here. And this recording today will be made available on Facebook. It will be sent out to our e-tree. It will be posted on Instagram and Twitter. And it will also, as Holly said, be made available on our website. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you again, Jeannie. May God bless you in what you do and in your ministry. And thank you again, everyone. And we'll catch you next week for the next installment of our Proudly Pro-Life webcast. Thank you again. Bye-bye.